we came up with an idea called a mobile production unit, and that meant taking production out of the studio and putting women journalists in cars with a very small kind of assembly of electronics, consumer electronics, an audio recorder, and a laptop and a microphone and headphones. And she would go and she would interview people, and she'd have her story, and she'd make 10-minute audio files. We could use cell phones to transfer these programs, these 10-minute audio files. So think podcasting, but in a viral kind of peer-to-peer network. The journalist would choose a focal point at a listening center, like a drop-in center or a maternity ward. Those were our most popular. And so they would exchange the audio file, one phone to the other, on Bluetooth, and then with solar rechargers, they could play that audio file all day for people who wanted to hear it. And what we found is we were immediately very popular. And women didn't want to hear it just one time, they wanted to hear it again and again. It was information about birth control and what was happening at State House on maternity laws. And we had a feedback mechanism so our journalists knew what they wanted to hear the next week. There was a man who had heard this admission by Alina, one of our journalists, which was that it was against the law to beat your wife. And he was astonished, and he confided in her that he didn't know that that was really, in fact, not only illegal, but contrary to human rights and other issues. So that was one of our success stories. At the end, I asked the journalist to give an anecdote. Was there something that happened this month? And so Victoria Bernard, who's in McKinney, wrote one month, and I love this, and she said, you know, I walk down the street and there's all these unemployed guys, and now they're all calling me Mama Dem Women, which in Creole means mother of women. So our journalists are being seen as something that's important and new. So this turned out very well. But what happened with Ebola is we had finished our first grant, and we were trying to figure out how to move forward. And all of a sudden we have lockdown situations, and our journalists couldn't travel any longer. So our journalists came up with a new idea, and that was we'll create our listeners as our networks, and we'll pass from one listener to another to a target village where we have someone called an ambassador. So we would target villages way out in the rural areas of Sierra Leone from major towns, and the journalists would create their audio files, usually interviewing local officials and people on the street and covering issues that were relevant. Half of the stories were about Ebola. And then we would use our listeners to pass one to another. And then we could call the village to see if the file had made it. And if there was a break in the chain, we would know. And it was much cheaper. Suddenly, this adversity, we'd become more creative. And so now we have this new concept. We have a new round of funding from the African Women's Development Fund and Oak Foundation and Indigo Trust. So now we have a third way. We've become more creative, and we're hoping to launch another pilot and to grow these networks that we've already started.
Subsidise my business and pay childcare.